December 1944, Ardennes Forest occupied Belgium. Hauptsturmführer Klaus VBR of the 12th S Panzer Corps stood at his tactical map observing the crossroads near Dombuchenbach. The order was simple: take the road, open the passage toward Emborn, proceed. The German maneuver should have required just hours. The roads were narrow, the forest was dense. American defenders, exhausted from weeks in the Hurricane, should have collapsed. But at 6:30 on December 17th, when Weber's first units attacked through snow and ice, something went terribly wrong. The fire didn't stop. The weapons didn't fall silent. The road passages stayed locked. 12 hours later, as his men withdrew to regroup, VBR understood he wasn't fighting scattered Americans. He was fighting a system commanded by a rifleman named Rocky Moretto of the 26th Infantry Regiment, a system of coordinated fire, pre-registered artillery, rapid radio communication, practiced procedures, 12 hours of perfect system, 12 hours that would cost everything. Weber was about to discover that American superiority wasn't numbers or courage. It was discipline made into doctrine. The Ardennes offensive had been conceived as a decisive blow. 60 German divisions, maximum concentration on the Meuse, drive toward the sea to isolate the British sector and fracture the Allied coalition. German command had calculated everything. Weather would deny Allied air superiority. Snow and cold would slow response. Defenders were scattered, exhausted, poorly organized. The initial push had to be irresistible. The main roads toward Elsenborn were only 3. Dombuchenbach controlled the northern road. It was the mandatory passage for any maneuver toward Elsenborn Ridge. German command knew that if the road opened within 6 hours, the maneuver would succeed. Within 12 hours, the push could consolidate. Within 24 hours, the route would be decisive, but everything depended on controlling that road. The terrain around Dombuchenbach was perfect for defense. Dense forest limited visibility and movement. Main road passages could be covered by prepared firing positions. Broken ground made any flanking maneuver difficult. If Americans had time to organize defense, register artillery, prepare interlocking fields of fire, the road could be held. But German command didn't know who held that road. The 2nd Company of the 26th Infantry Regiment, 1st Division, the Big Red One, held the line around Dombuchenbach. They were not ordinary defenders. Omaha Beach, Normandy breakout, Hurricane Forest fighting. Among the few who had survived 6 months of continuous combat without being killed, seriously wounded or captured, Rocky Moretto, a 26-year-old rifleman, had been with them from Omaha through Hurricane to these Ardennes woods. He knew how to fight. He knew how to survive. But more important, he knew the system of coordinated small unit tactics, the system of rapid communication, the system of discipline under pressure, the system that would for 28 hours keep a German offensive stalled at a frozen crossroads. German intelligence didn't know Rocky Moretto's name, but they would learn what his name meant. Hauptsturmführer Klaus VBR, aged 48, had spent 26 years in the German army. Poland, France, Eastern Front, wounded twice, Iron Cross twice. Respected in his command for tactical assessment, pragmatic, had observed Americans throughout the war. He had seen them in North Africa, Sicily, Normandy. One thing had always struck him: they didn't fight well individually, but as system, as organization, they were nearly unstoppable. They could replace losses. They could coordinate artillery from enormous distances. They could move troops in rapid order, even in chaos. They had something Germans didn't have. They had redundancy. They had standardization. They had procedure. Weber had warned his command many times. "It's not the man in front of you," he had said. "It's the machine behind him. It's the ability to adjust fire in minutes. It's the ability to get ammunition to the foxhole. It's the system." But command didn't listen. Command had plans. Command had orders. Command had certainty. When Weber was ordered to Dombuchenbach as observer, he didn't know he would witness the system in action. He didn't know a rifleman named Rocky Moretto would prove his warnings correct. Moretto was nothing special on paper. 26 years old, from the Bronx, Regular infantry, no special training, no special rank, just a soldier who had survived longer than most. But Moretto represented something larger than himself. He represented the Big Red One discipline, the 26th Infantry tradition, the American capacity to take ordinary men and organize them into extraordinary units. German command expected to find scattered defenders at Donutkinbach. What they would find instead was Rocky Moretto's company, a working system, a system where every man knew his role. At 6:20 on December 17, 1944, German units attacked the Don-Budkenbach crossroads through the snow. Weber watched from an elevated position, binoculars aimed at the road where Rocky Moretto and the Second Company waited. Germans descended from forest-covered hills in tactically correct formations. Infantry proceeded. Machine guns covered flanks. Mortars positioned according to doctrine. Everything looked perfect. Then American fire began. It wasn't scattered. It wasn't panicked. It was organized. It was concentrated. It was disciplined. The coordination shocked VBR. This wasn't isolated defenders fighting for survival. This was a system responding to contact. This was procedure. Germans stopped, sought cover, sought passages. But passages were covered by interlocking fire. Positions were registered. Fields of fire left no gaps. Weber understood immediately. Rocky Moretto's company wasn't improvising, they were executing. Weber grabbed the radio. First contact. Domenbach zone. Enemy has registered fields of fire. Coordinated resistance. Enemy executes response within minutes of contact. Germans will execute tactical withdrawal to regroup. The response from command was slow. They were surprised. They had expected rapid collapse. They had calculated 6 hours for the road. Now after 30 minutes that road was still closed. VBR timed the start of contact. 6:20. Germans had 12 hours before it became too late. 12 hours to open the road. 12 hours before Americans consolidated serious defense. 12 hours before Rocky Moretto's system became unbreakable. In the 90 minutes that followed, Weber witnessed something that confirmed everything he had theorized about American military organization. Every time Germans attempted a maneuver on the main road, American fire reoriented. It wasn't random. It wasn't slow reactive fire. It was anticipated fire. It was as if Rocky Moretto's men knew where Germans would attack, as if they had pre-registered fields of fire. At 8, almost 2 hours into the attack, Weber timed the exchange between German contact fire and American counter-response. Contact, pause, artillery fire. The time was measured in minutes, not hours, not half hours, minutes. This indicated rapid communication. Observers who could locate German fire and transmit it to artillery batteries that corrected and fired in incredibly brief times. Weber knew Germans had radios, but their system required more steps. Observer locates target, calculates grid, transmits to sector command. Command orders the battery. Battery corrects and fires. It was a process that always required a few extra minutes. The American system appeared more direct. Observer locates target, transmits via radio. Battery fires. Corrections arrive and are applied, all in minutes. At 6 hours into the attack, Weber had seen something deeply troubling. Germans weren't advancing, but they weren't collapsing. They kept attacking. Every attack was repulsed. Every attempt on a passage met concentrated fire, but Germans continued probing, trying. It was like fighting a machine, not men. A machine that reacted in minutes. A machine that didn't tire. A machine that made no tactical errors. Weber understood something in that moment. Rocky Moretto's men could fight. They could be brave. They could attack with discipline, but they couldn't break the American system. The system of rapid radio communication. The system of coordinated artillery. The system of registered firing fields. The system of rotating reserves and micro-resupply. It was all perfect. It was all calculated. It was all coordinated. At 200 hours, 8 hours into the attack, Weber sent a different report than before. The enemy maintains the line through fire, coordination, and artillery. Their reaction cadence is rapid. We're losing more men than anticipated. The maneuver toward Ellenbourne is slowed. It didn't seem to Weber he was writing anything different from any other tactical report. But it was different, because now he understood it wasn't about tactics, it was about system. Rocky Moretto's system, the Big Red One system, the American system of procedure made into doctrine. At 1600 hours, 10 hours into the attack, Hauptsturmführer Klaus VDR sat at his observation position, watching through binoculars. The road to Elsenborn remained closed. Germans had continued attacking. Americans continued repulsing. Rocky Moretto's company continued executing. The cold was punishing. Temperatures dropped below C. Men on both sides suffered. Weapons froze. Rifle mechanisms slowed. But American fire didn't slow. This told WWII something critical. Americans had procedures to keep weapons functioning in cold. Special lubrication procedures, mechanisms, protection procedures. Rocky Moretto's men maintained their weapons differently than Germans maintained theirs. The difference was small but decisive. American fire was constant, precise, coordinated. At 1700, German command ordered a final major attack. Mortar concentration, intense preparation fire, a decisive attempt to break the line. German mortars fired for 40 minutes. Brush on the road was decimated. Trees were shattered. Shrapnel flew. But when preparation fire ceased, when German infantry rushed forward, American fire resumed. It wasn't weakened. It wasn't disorganized. It was perfect. It was as if Rocky Moretto's men hadn't even heard the bombardment, as if they knew bombardment would come, as if they had positioned men in depth and bombardment was only hitting empty spaces. Weber understood in that moment that Americans weren't improvising. They were executing procedures they had practiced many times, procedures they knew worked, procedures they had taught every soldier, including a 26-year-old rifleman from the Bronx named Rocky Moretto. The average American soldier wasn't a tactical genius, wasn't an individual hero. He was a gear in a machine, perfectly synchronized, perfectly disciplined, perfectly effective. At 1800 hours, 12 hours from first contact, VBR sent his final report to command. The road at Dunbutkenbash will not fall today. Enemy has rapid reaction capability. Fire coordination and artillery are superior. The maneuver toward Ellenbourne is denied. I recommend consolidating positions and withdrawing in good order. It wasn't the report command wanted to hear, but it was the report it needed to hear. German certainty that the road would fall had been proven wrong, not through tactical error, not through lack of courage, through system superiority, through American organizational power, through the discipline of men like Rocky Moretto. The certainty was gone. VBR began to systematically analyze what he had observed from Rocky Moretto's positions. American fire wasn't random. It was organized according to principles WWII could deduce from the firing pattern. First, there was clear coordination between firing positions. When one position was threatened, other positions provided support fire. This indicated centralized communication. Someone coordinated fire from a central position. The pattern wasn't men acting independently, but a system. Rocky Moretto's system. Second, fire was adjusted based on German movements. When Germans sought passage to the north, American fire shifted north. When they attempted south, fire shifted south. This indicated observers who could transmit target information with speed and precision. Third, artillery arrived within minutes of initial contact, not within half hours, within minutes. This indicated a radio communication system. Trans radios that could transmit target grids and receive fire corrections equally rapidly. Weber knew Germans had radios, but their system required more steps. Observer locates target, calculates grid, transmits to sector command. Command orders the battery. Battery corrects and fires. It was a process that always took a few more minutes. The American system appeared more direct. Observer located the target, transmitted via trans radio. The battery fired. Corrections arrived and were applied, all in minutes. Fourth, firing fields were pre-registered. This meant Rocky Moretto's company. when they arrived at Mutkenbach, had designated fire lines, distances, and firing axes. They had calculated everything in advance. When the enemy attacked, they didn't have to calculate. They only had to fire according to their pre-registers. This was pure efficiency. Fifth, cold hadn't compromised American fire. Weapons continued shooting. This indicated special maintenance procedures. M1 rifles had to be lubricated differently in cold. Rocky Moretto's men knew this. They had practiced it. They maintained their weapons. Germans probably didn't know, or perhaps knew but hadn't practiced sufficiently. The result was German weapons becoming less reliable, while American weapons stayed efficient. Sixth, defender rotation was rapid and effective. Weber noticed Americans didn't continuously keep men on the front line. They rotated men, brought men back to warm, to eat, to rest, then brought them forward again. This maintained high combat capability. Rocky Moretto understood this. He rotated his men. He maintained their fighting ability. Germans had to do the same, but it seemed less organized, seemed improvised. The American system was the opposite of improvisation. It was technical, it was mathematical, it was industrial. It was Rocky Moretto's system, the big red one system, the American system. Weber realized something simple but profound. The fire he had observed from Rocky Moretto's positions, the precision, the coordination, the speed of reaction, all of it wasn't the result of exceptionally skilled soldiers. It was the result of procedures. Procedures that could be taught, procedures that could be practiced, procedures that once mastered made ordinary soldiers like a 26-year-old rifleman from the Bronx extraordinarily efficient. The American system didn't require geniuses. It required discipline. It required training. It required coordination. It required radios. It required ammunition in quantity. It required artillery. It required everything in abundance. Germany had genius. Germany had superior tactics in many aspects. Germany had brave soldiers, but Germany didn't have abundance. Germany didn't have radios for every observer. Germany didn't have unlimited ammunition for practice and training. Germany didn't have the luxury of constant rotation. Germany didn't have the luxury of elaborate practiced procedures. Americans had all of this. Americans could train every soldier for 6 months. Could practice procedures until they became automatic. Rocky Moretto had gone through this training, could equip every position with rapid communication, could supply ammunition in quantities so that every position could fire thousands of rounds, could afford to lose men and replace them without degradation of combat capability. The American system was based on one thing alone: industrial capacity. The capacity to produce radios in mass, the capacity to produce ammunition in mass, the capacity to train soldiers in mass, the capacity to equip every unit with the same standards. Germany couldn't do this. Ammunition supplies were limited, training was abbreviated, radios were rare, standardization was difficult. Every German unit was a slightly different variant. Every unit had slightly different procedures. The result was an army complex, tactical but not always coordinated. The American system was the opposite. It was simple, it was standardized, it was completely coordinated, and it had won a Don Buchenbach, not because of Rocky Moretto's individual heroism, because of his participation in a system, because of Big Red One procedure, because of American organizational capacity, the capacity to coordinate 12 hours of continuous fire. Rapid artillery, of reliable communication, of disciplined procedure. All of this came from industry. All of this came from planning. All of this came from procedure. Weber understood the war wasn't any more a question of individual tactics. It was a question of system. And the American system, the system that Rocky Moretto represented, was superior. At 2,000 hours, 14 hours from attack start, German command ordered a pause. Men were exhausted. Losses were significant. The road remained closed. Rocky Moretto's company was still holding, still executing, still professional. At dusk, Germans withdrew from contact positions and reorganized for a later attack. But everyone knew the truth. The road to Elsenborn wouldn't open that day. Maybe not at all. German planning depended on rapid successes in the first 2 days. Ellenborn was supposed to open day 1. It had taken 14 hours, and the passage still remained closed. This meant the maneuver had lost momentum. This meant Americans had time to consolidate. This meant Rocky Moretto's system had proven its worth. At 2020 hours, HPM Führer Klaus WW2 wrote his final report of the day. The enemy maintained control of Donutkenbach through superior fire coordination and rapid radio communication. Enemy tactical procedures are well practiced. Artillery fire is accurate and coordinated. The maneuver toward Ellenborn is denied. I recommend consolidating in the current line and re-evaluating attack strategy. It wasn't what command wanted to hear, but it was the truth. The certainty that the offensive would break the American line in days had been proven deeply wrong. Not for lack of German courage, not for American tactical superiority in the traditional sense, for system superiority, for ability to coordinate and maintain fire for 12 straight hours, for ability to communicate with speed, for ability to practice procedures until they became automatic, for industrial capacity to supply ammunition, radios, equipment. The days that followed confirmed Weber's observations. The German maneuver stalled. Americans consolidated defenses along Ellenborn Ridge. Germany's initial advantage, which should have been decisive, evaporated in the Ardennes cold. Rocky Moretto survived the war. After the war, he left the army, went back to the Bronx, worked construction, married, had children. He never talked much about Donbuckenbach, never talked much about holding the road for 20 hours. But he understood something that most soldiers never understand. He understood that individual heroism meant nothing compared to system. He understood that the American way of war wasn't about exceptional men. It was about ordinary men organized into exceptional systems. That's what kept the road closed for 20 hours, not Rocky Moretto's courage, his participation in the Big Red One system. The road at Donbuckenbach remains a minor episode in the great history of the Battle of the Bulge. It wasn't a decisive battle. It didn't completely stop the German offensive, but it was important for one reason. It demonstrated on local and tactical scale the principle that would decide the war. The principle that system wins, that coordination wins, that procedure wins, that industry wins. Hoped Führer Klaus WW2 understood this in 20 hours. 12 hours that were the predicted duration for the road to fall. 12 hours that instead became the duration of American resistance. 12 hours that had cost Germans their chance for rapid maneuver. 12 hours that had given Americans time to consolidate. 12 hours that Rocky Moretto and the Big Red One had made count. The defense of Elsenborn hadn't been the result of individual heroism. It had been the result of practiced procedures, of coordinated artillery, of radio communication, of registered firing fields, of discipline under pressure, of Rocky Moretto doing his job, of every soldier in his company doing their job, of the system functioning. The lesson of Donbuckenbach was a lesson Germany couldn't learn in time. It was a lesson that required industry, resources, and the capacity to standardize on large scale. Germany had none of these things in December 1904, and so when the Ardennes ended, the offensive had been stopped, not so much by American counterattacks, but by the fact that the American system of war was simply better. It was more efficient, it was faster, it was more reliable. And when faced with superior force, efficiency, speed, and reliability win, not courage, not tactics, the system that Rocky Moretto represented exactly as Hauptführer Klaus WW2 had learned watching through binoculars while the road to Ellenborn remained closed and American fire continued coordinated, precise, ceaseless for 12 hours that would decide the fate of a maneuver and perhaps of a fall.